Today, we're going to dive into a single, absolutely monumental judgment from India's Supreme Court. This one decision fundamentally redefined what privacy means for over a billion people. This is the story of the Puttaswamy judgment.
You know, it's a question that hits home for literally every single one of us. Our lives are just constantly generating data. So, who gets to draw the line between what's public and what's private? The government? The tech companies we use every day? Or should it be us? And for India, this wasn't some abstract debate. It became incredibly real, incredibly fast, all because of Aadhaar. This was this massive government project to get biometric data, fingerprints, iris scans, from every single resident. The controversy around it basically created the perfect legal storm, forcing the highest court in the land to finally settle a debate that had been raging for decades. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at the confusing legal past that got us here, then we'll unpack the landmark verdict itself. We'll get into the core reasoning behind it, see what limits this right has, and finally explore what it all means for us in this digital age. So before this big case, Puttaswamy, the whole idea of privacy as a fundamental right in India was, well, to put it mildly, it was a total mess. The courts had been going back and forth on it for more than 50 years. So how did things get so tangled up? Well, the confusion goes way back. In 1954, a court ruling just flat out said privacy was not a constitutional right, period. But then, just a few years later, another case came along and sent a totally mixed signal. The court said, yeah, those late-night police visits are an intrusion on liberty, but in the same breath, the judges still said there was no guaranteed right to privacy. It just created this huge legal knot that nobody could untangle for decades. Okay, so to finally cut through this decades-long confusion, the Supreme Court did something it only does for the most critical, nation-defining questions. It put together a massive 9-judge bench to give a final, binding answer. Nine judges, and look, in the world of constitutional law, that is a huge deal. A bench this large shows just how incredibly important the question was, and it ensures that whatever they decide will carry enormous legal weight for generations to come. And when the ruling finally dropped on August 24th, 2017, wow, it was not only historic, it was unanimous. All 9 judges were on the same page, sending this incredibly powerful, unified message across the entire country. So this is the heart of it right here. The court declared that privacy isn't some new right they just invented. Nope, they said it's an intrinsic part of the right to life and personal liberty that was already in the Constitution. It's always been there, just woven into the fabric of India's most basic freedoms. And with that, those confusing old judgments were officially overturned. Okay, so that's what they decided. But the why? That's where things get really fascinating. The court's reasoning was just so profound. And it all boiled down to these 3 core values that really define what it means to be a human being. First up, dignity. The court basically argued that a life without dignity isn't the life that the Constitution promises. And to truly have dignity, you have to have a private sphere, a space where you're not being constantly watched or judged. Privacy is what makes a dignified life even possible. Next, you've got liberty. The court said, look, liberty is way more than just not being in jail. It's the freedom to be yourself, to think your own thoughts, to grow as a person. And that kind of inner development absolutely requires a private space, a sanctuary away from the world. And all of that, dignity and liberty, it leads to this third really crucial idea, autonomy. It's the right to make your own essential life choices, who you love, what you believe, how you live your life, without the state peering over your shoulder. The court said privacy is the foundation of that personal freedom. So when you put it all together, the court made this incredibly powerful statement. These rights, dignity, liberty, autonomy, and the privacy that holds them all up, they are not gifts from the government. They're natural and inalienable. They exist just because we are human. The Constitution's job isn't to grant these rights. Its job is to recognize them and protect them from being taken away. Okay, but here's a really important piece of the puzzle. The court was crystal clear on this. Just like free speech, the right to privacy is fundamental, but it is not absolute. There are situations where the state can limit it, but only under very, very specific conditions. And they didn't just leave it vague. They laid out this super clear 3-part test that any government action has to pass. First, it's got to be legal. There has to be an actual law behind it. Second, there has to be a real need, a legitimate reason for the state to get involved. And third, it has to be proportional. That means the government must use the least intrusive way possible to get the job done.
So, you might be asking, what exactly counts as a legitimate reason for the state to step in? Well, the court gave a few examples, things you might expect, like protecting national security, or preventing crime, or making sure social welfare benefits are actually going to the people who need them. But even in those cases, the government's actions still have to pass the legality and proportionality tests. All right, so how does all this constitutional talk apply to our world? You know, the world of smartphones and social media. Well, the court wasn't just thinking about police knocking on your door. It was very aware that the biggest threats to our privacy today are all about technology and data. The court specifically recognized this idea of informational privacy. This is basically your right to have some control over your personal data, how it's collected, how it's used, and who it's shared with. It's not just about keeping secrets, it's about you being in the driver's seat when it comes to your own digital footprint. And this is maybe one of the most critical parts for us today. The court knew the danger wasn't just coming from the government. It also comes from what it called non-state actors. Think about it. That's the social media companies, the apps on your phone, the data brokers you've never even heard of. This judgment says your fundamental right to privacy has to be protected from both of them. So in the end, this huge judgment, it wasn't really an ending. It was a new beginning. It gave people a powerful shield and set the stage for the next fight. The principles are now set in stone, but the battle to apply them in our fast-changing world is just getting started, which leaves us all with a pretty urgent question. As technology keeps reshaping every part of our lives, how are we going to make sure this fundamental right is actually protected?